Okay, we're going live to YouTube, guys. We are going live. Going live. We are live on YouTube. And I want to welcome everybody to the wonderful world of Benjamin, Jeremy, Stein. We are all on location tonight. Locations unknown, locations untold. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. And there he is from Young Voices of America. Welcome back as always. You gotta unmute yourself, Nate Hodgman. How are you tonight, sir? And I gotta tell you something very interesting, Gary, before I get to everybody, is that my mother, and Ben could understand this a little bit, when you grow up in a I don't know if Ben could understand this, but my geography was countries that hated Jews, and also I was very taught about German or Jewish names. And Hochman, we were discussing until last show, we didn't know if we were debating until you said anyways, there you are, Nate Hochman from Young Voices
I'm
of
a
America.
German Jew, which is it's an odd confluence of identities. But
yes, you're a Jew that has lived with liberal parents. You're a conservative that moved to now the most Republican part of Oregon.
That's
and
right.
Also, let's thank everybody that's in the chat room. Let's also welcome from the simplelifenow.com, Gary Collins, one of the best podcasters in America. Served this country for over 20 years, stone cold, a fox, and a great Rush fan and shirt.
Great Russian.
Rush
Another
fan.
shirt. Another shirt.
And you see, here's a good thing. Somebody brought up the name Wolf, and if it ends with an E, it's usually not Jewish because it's Wolf A. But of course, this show would not be complete without the man, the myth, the legend, provocateur, scientist, hedonist,
doctor,
biochemist, and of course, America's humble servant, America's teacher, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We salute you, Mr. Stein. And of course, let's welcome everybody to this. Let's welcome everybody to this Sunday night show. If you could hear my voice is a little in and out. But one of the things I wanted to get to right away was I don't want to get to the awards or that stuff because it almost reminds me of like if somebody wins an award, it's like the tree in the forest and it falls. Does anybody actually hear it?
Oh, that's very, very good. Very good. Very good. Very good.
But Ben Stein, I want to get to you about something because I was on a phone. I want to get to all of you and get your opinions. You could hear my voice a little in and out, but I want to get all your opinions because I was on a phone call with a friend of mine, and you and I, Ben, lately also have been very down on how change could happen, and we've become very soft. And I look at how a country Ben could get unified again. And as I'm looking at the foreign policy blunders and future blunders of this administration, I can't help but thinking they're creating another path for another, call it ISIS, call it whatever you want. But their foreign policy is going to set us back. And I'm scared about our foreign policy right now. But I also think that could bring us together, maybe.
Well, I don't see why it could bring us together, but the reason America was together the most it's ever been during the Second World War was just because the communists and the media in America were all united with fighting for the Soviet Union against the Nazis. We've never been that united again because the communists and the media in America have never been that ordered to play by the rules with America again. That's one. Two, bigger word. Two, the idea that America is now begging and pleading with the Iranians to let them play with the Iranians and let the Iranians have nuclear weapons on a scale that would have been undreamt of even 8 or 9 years ago is it's horrifying beyond words. There's no reason to believe the Iranians won't use nuclear weapons. They're not afraid to die. They want to die. They like to die. So I'm very, very scared about that situation. I'm very, very scared about the fact that I know, and we all know, that President Biden is going to lower the defense budget. We know that. It's just the way the Democrats are. And it's a very, very serious mistake, but the Democrats tend to do it over and over and over again. So, yes, I am very worried about it. How you think it's going to pull America together again? I'm dying to find out.
Well, but I don't acknowledge him as President Biden. That's first of all, but that's for a whole other thing. The reason I bring that up is because after you look, and I'll go to after 9/11 happened, the country was unified until GW managed to pull the hat trick of hat tricks and totally scramble his own party and every party and not unify everybody. But Gary, who's served, I don't see how the actions they're taking abroad aren't going to bring. I'm not hoping for this, and I'm not wishing on this, forms of terrorism, because we already see the Taliban going nuts, with bombings today. I don't see how it doesn't cross shores. That's just my humble opinion, Gary, you being the expert on foreign policy.
We have a foreign policy. I didn't even know we had a border at this point. So
that's very good. Very good. That's very, very good. It's very good. Very good.
And plus, Black lives are the only lives that matter. So it doesn't matter. And everything else is moot. And give everyone knives, because it appears that teenagers knife fighting is very common, and you should not interfere with that, because that's just racism.
Just kids being kids. Just kids being kids, who didn't stab someone in the face when they were, 13 years old?
Yeah.
Well,
very good.
I grew up in a small, rough town, and I've seen quite a few fights and maybe been in a couple during my time. I've never seen a fight with a knife. And so I guess I just grew up in a different place. But yeah, no, our foreign policy, exactly. We will see a resurgence of ISIS. And it will, I hope not, but the odds are they will cross the border. They probably already have, to be honest.
Cross the border into the U.S.? Of course they have. I mean,
and Ben, that's
coming in over.
I mean, recently. They're already here. The cells have been here forever. Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people coming across. We don't know who the heck they are. You don't think ISIS is smart enough to figure out to send some people along calling themselves Jose and Xavier? Of course they are. These guys are not dumb, and they're vicious, cruel, sadistic, evil, but they're not dumb.
I love how you had those names popping off your head, but I want to get to, and I want to get back to this, but I was on the phone with my friend who is part of the silent majority. None of us are part of the silent majority because we're loud. And
none of us is part. And none is a singular pronoun. You do this all the time.
Thank you, Mrs. Levin. And Nate, I will go to you, not being part of the silent majority. I'm very scared that what's coming at the border and what our foreign policy, what damage it'll do. And my hope is, if anything happens, that can unite us.
I hope so too. I'm perhaps maybe a little bit more black than you are, Judah, about the prospect of American unity. I think our partisan divisions represent fundamental and irreconcilable disagreements about not just what the role of politics are or what America means, but literally what it means to be human, right? What it means to be a man and a woman. These are not things that we can overcome just, if we have sort of an issue that we can all unify behind. Coronavirus should have been that, but it couldn't be because, half of the country thought it was okay to sort of live in lockdowns in perpetuity. So, the last time the country was really unified was after 9/11, where, 95% of America was on board with just with one another, I think, for the first time in decades. If 9/11 happened today, I don't think that we'd have that same kind of unity.
My dear young friend, that unity did not last that long. It lasted for a while, but not that long. Pretty soon, the long knife out for Mr. Bush too.
Yeah, it lasted 2 seconds. And Ben, I go to you, but you told me about a conversation you had with a loved one. So Nate, I know you don't see this as being unified, but I was in shock and awe over something a loved one said to Ben, or told the story of something that happened to her. If you care to repeat it, I was quite fascinated.
Yeah, a very, very, very intelligent woman, is very close to me. in a very big eastern city, and she was talking to some of her friends who are also well-to-do older women, very, very intelligent, well-educated. And they were talking about how great it was that the COVID vaccine had gotten out so quickly, and that it was free. It's completely free. And my loved one said, well, you know who we have to thank for that? And the other two women in the party said, well, Biden, of course. And my loved one said, no, Trump. And she said that the other two women at the table just felt completely silent. Could not bring themselves to acknowledge that.
Operation Warp Speed was a miracle. I mean, it was an act of genius. Like it was. I still, of course, we're never going to have a national reckoning with just how much of an incredible feat it was because of the way that our partisan media ecosystem works. But that's precisely why I just don't think we could be unified about something even as significant as like an existential foreign policy threat like Iran getting nukes, is because of the way that our media works, right? You know, if there's the border crisis is a perfect example. Half of the country will be reading the New York Times and the Washington Post and watching CNN, and they'll be being told something completely different from the reality of the situation. You see that happening on the border where, the New York Times doesn't want to call it a border crisis, and they're, suddenly have lost interest in covering the kids in cages now that the good guys are in charge. It's just the way that we process our reality now.
I'd like to now go back to something because you're a data guy. I wonder what percent of America does read the New York Times, and what is the circulation of the New York Times?
Not very. Until Trump, had it not been for Trump, they would have been out of business.
Okay, so there's 300. There are roughly 340 million Americans, and 2.5, 3 million at most read the New York Times. How much of America is in fact?
And this was going to be. Just so you know, this was going to be the second topic of tonight of where do you get your news sources from, and which I'm very curious about. But I want to get back to this thing a little bit because Trump planned on pulling out the troops too. But there's a difference between Trump negotiating, Gary, of pulling out troops, and Biden negotiating of pulling out troops, because Trump pulling out troops and then you screw around with him could lead to a Moab. Biden will lead to absolute capitulation, Gary.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I just got a pop-up for ISIS Lives Matter, so I want to blend in with the rest of half America and get my shirt. But no, I totally agree. The problem is, and you guys know I'm a middle ground guy, right? I don't belong to either party. I don't really
Yes, you're Switzerland. We know.
I know. Not really. I'm not Switzerland. I'm not a pacifist. I fight the battles that need to be fought. But with that, I mean, the problem is the left always likes to let everyone know what they're going to do. When you're dealing with military strategic, and moving troops around, you never tip your hand. Never. You never say we're pulling out. You never say any of that. If you're going to pull out, you shut your mouth and you pull the troops out. Because you put everyone in danger, and it pisses me off that they dictate these terms. And even China, did you see that thing? I saw this briefly, that China was basically telling us how racist we are and that we need to correct our own house of racism before we start pointing the fingers at China. And all of our diplomats sat there like a bunch of pussies and took it. And I couldn't believe it. We're getting terms dictated on human rights by China, and we're saying nothing.
We agree with them. It's not we're saying nothing. I mean,
we totally agree with them.
Our ambassador to the UN, I'm sure you guys saw the clip of our ambassador to the UN saying that we couldn't join the UN Human Rights Council, which has been chaired by Saudi Arabia and North Korea.
And Libya at one time.
Right. And a variety of other human rights abusers until we deal with the white supremacy that's written into our founding documents, which, by the way, white supremacy is not written into our founding documents.
And by the way, just so everybody knows, Nate is extremely insightful. Nate is extremely brilliant, like you're saying in your chat. We absolutely love him. I wish the last show we did with him didn't get banned by YouTube, but it was because of me. But I want to
Yeah.
welcome everybody to the world
Good
according
work.
to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody in the podcast room. In the YouTube chat. Sorry, my voice is a little off. I love your comments. Please keep downloading the podcast. It means the world to us. Thank you for coming into this Sunday night special. We're all across the country. It's actually very exciting, loving it, doing this. And I want to get back. I miss you, Ben. Ben's out of town. And I got to tell people, when Ben's out of town, we don't know even if we don't see each other every day, part of me is missing. And and I mean that. It's like I feel like, but even though I know I could always go to Fort Crescent, part of me is always missing. And on that note, welcome back to the World According to Ben Stein. And we're discussing something tonight that I think is extremely important, because we've taken Ben Stein, as Nate and Gary, I want you guys to both discuss this. We've taken the systemic racism on a national level, and we've raised it to a world level at this point with what you're saying about the UN, and that's frightening.
Well, are you talking to me? I don't
Yes.
care. Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you.
You talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
You're talking to me? Okay. The people who run this country want to humiliate us, want to make us feel less than, want to diminish us, and think that by doing that, they make themselves seem more important. Some very funny guy named Mr. Sears is making a series of videos about victimization, about how you make yourself big by pretending to be the victim. So we now have people all over this country who are incredibly privileged people pretending to be the victims, and pretending to be the victims of all things, the most ridiculous thing in the world, the totally fake charge of current systemic racism. The people who are running this country right now since January 20th are people who do not like America and want to see America laid low. It's very sad. I'm not sure there's ever been a situation like this in world history, except perhaps at the beginning of World War II, when the Nazis invaded France, and a great many of the top French officials preferred the Nazis to the Third Republic democracy people in France. So that, other than that, I'm not sure we've ever seen a situation quite like the one we're in now.
Well, the complete ignorance too, and the systemic racism, and I get pretty offended as being called white privilege. Obviously, I grew up poorer than LeBron James, who had him and his mom. People forget, had brand new Humvees when he was 16. Shut up, LeBron James. You're a God. I want to punch that guy straight in the face. He's such an asshole. But I kid you not, that guy is an arrogant, pompous loser. But he's an example. The people he supports and the party he supports were the ones who voted in Jim Crow laws. And not only that, they supported slavery. We had a war over it, and his side was the one who wanted to continue slavery. These people need to pull their head out of their ass, open a textbook, open a real history book, and pay attention. You're on the wrong side. These people are hypocrites. They're calling systemic racism when they were the racist who caused all these rules and laws against blacks. Am I losing my mind?
No, you're not. You're not. And I'll go to Nate on this. And you're not. And I had the same conversation with my friend on the phone. And my friend, my good acquaintance, because Ben's my only friend. And I said to him, and he can't understand you can't get into the psyche of the left. It's nearly impossible to have rational with the irrational. It's an impossibility. So you're having a critical thought, Gary. There's no critical thinking with there, Nate. It's just insane. When you wake up every day and you say, this is how I'm going to think today, how do you discuss that?
Well, it's not. I think even that they lack critical thinking, because I think there are plenty of people on the left who are intelligent and sort of have basic intellectual capacities. It's that they're profoundly invested in not listening to reason. They're profoundly invested in not actually listening to your argument, because for them it's not about rational discourse in the sort of marketplace about power. And this is, and you can see, like, we have collectively decided as a culture and as a society now that certain words shut down discussion and certain words wield an enormous amount of power. And when you deploy words like racist or white supremacist or, any number of other words, that has an enormous amount of power because everyone goes, oh, well, if it's racist, then we just shouldn't take it seriously, or, that person needs to be excised from polite society. And, increasingly that we're seeing this in a variety of different mediums like big tech and the universities and even in our politics. We're seeing the Overton window of what's being allowed to say constrict, to a smaller and smaller a range of what is allowed to be said. And that's because the left isn't actually interested in having a debate where you give your side of the argument, they give their side of the argument, and we sort of reason through it together and we decide on what the best outcome is. It's about power. And I think this is, the last point. There are a lot of conservatives and Republicans who are still really naive about what is going on in America and what time it is in the United States today, because they still think that we can just, if our ideas are better than theirs and, we make better arguments than they do, well, we'll win in the war of ideas and people will come around. No, that's not how this works anymore, right? When they have the media, when they have the technology companies in Silicon Valley, you can make the best arguments in the world with the most beautifully reasoned, logical arguments. It doesn't matter. They don't care. And most Americans increasingly don't have actually access to hear, your side of the argument. So we have to think more creatively than just having good arguments and having good ideas. Like Mitt Romney standing up and giving a graduate seminar in macroeconomics, it might be interesting, but that's not actually how this works anymore. And we have to actually start thinking that way because a lot of conservatives don't think that way still.
Brilliantly said.
And a seminar in macroeconomics. And I would never even consider having my dog strapped to the top of my car. I wouldn't even consider it for a minute, let alone for many hundreds of miles. Look, you guys are still being way too kind to the left in this country. They are basically after control. They're not interested in the Constitution. They're not interested in free speech. The whole business of them and the African-American freedom fighters was always just a ploy by them to get at the moderate free speech people in America. George Wallace, obviously a deeply flawed person in many regards, many regards. Strom Thurmond, Senator Eastland, flawed people in many regards, many regards. They did allow for free speech. The present crop of leaders on the left just don't allow for free speech. They just are Bolsheviks. Let's not kid ourselves. They are Bolsheviks. They don't believe in free speech. They believe in control. And this goes back to really young people. I have a very close friend, an incredibly close friend. She's like 10 feet tall and really beautiful. And she has a daughter who's in, I forget what grade, but some very young grade, 4th, 5th grade, something like that, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. Even at that age, they're being brainwashed about what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say. 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, being brainwashed at that age. And I'll tell you something else which will stagger you. I had dinner tonight with some family members, and including their unbelievably beautiful daughter, who's 8 or 9, and who did not know, and lives in an affluent neighborhood, did not know what country South Carolina was in. Not just where it was on the map, what country South America was in. South Carolina was in. This shows kids are not being taught to think at all, even to read a map. They are being taught to raise their hands and say Sieg Heil. That's it. Sieg Heil environment, Sieg Heil diversity, Sieg Heil women's are getting mistreated, Sieg Heil about anything the left says.
Or civics has been displaced by multiculturalism, right? So while she couldn't place South Carolina on the map, I bet she could practically speak Inca, right? Because we don't teach our children about checks and balances, and we
I don't even. Did you say Inga?
Inca,
I know a girl named Inga who's a checkout girl at the Pavilion supermarket in Malibu. She's really nice.
Gary, sorry.
Go ahead.
Gary, what say you about this?
I don't know. Since I grew up with 2 black parents, that obviously, because me and Kamala Harris are actually related. if you didn't notice, I heard a guy on Fox News. I don't know why I turned that on, but I can't watch any news. There's nothing to watch. But he called Kamala Harris the first black vice president or colored. I don't even know and I just went, she's not black. Stop it.
I've been saying that all along. I've been saying that from day
Yes,
one.
we know. You've been saying a lot of stuff all along, Ben. You've been saying stuff for 60 years. You got us beat. Let's just admit it. We're just late, we're coming to the party a little late. We got to talk.
Well, and that's the problem with the sociopathic mind. Sociopaths never think they're wrong, and also they think they can change the narrative to fit whatever they think. And that's what we're seeing. You're seeing a lot of sociopaths. And I worked in the government. I've been around. They're on the right and left. Washington, D.C. is jam-packed with them. But for some reason, the really crazy nuts have found their way into the left. And I don't know what we do about this anymore, because AOC is about as shithouse crazy as you can possibly get. I kid you not.
I like it. I love it.
I kid you not. And she has the biggest social media following. The youth and Gen Z and a lot of millennials think she is intelligent, well-informed, and a person to lead this country. And we are in deep shit if AOC is in this spirit.
We really
It's so funny. It's so funny you say that, and because I want to go to this point where you're saying, with this whole cancel culture, and a friend of mine was talking about some douchebag actor named Pat Noswell, and he's one of those little.
Never heard of that.
He's just an ass, and he's one of those people. He bullies people online. He does all those things, and these are cowards that aren't confronted. I'm amazed, and I am not calling for this, and I am not encouraging this. How
Maxine Waters does it all the time. It's totally fine.
How has Chuck Todd never fell off his feet? That's my question. How has nobody one time walked up to Chuck Todd and said, or Chuck Todd? And I don't understand. It really baffles me sometimes, because they're bullies. And the only way sometimes Trump handled bullies pretty well, but sometimes bullies, Ben, need to be bullied back.
I've never even heard of Chuck Todd. Who is he?
He's the guy from. Are you being serious? You're joking.
I'm very serious.
He's the host. He took over for Chris Matthews on MSNBC.
He's the least bad of all of them. I mean,
yeah, or Stephanopoulos, or any of them.
Or Brian Stelter, Jim Acosta.
Yeah. How has Brian Stelter never been Steltered? I mean, I just don't understand it.
He might be the single worst. Brian Stelter might be my least favorite.
It's the Bolshevist clique. Until the top Bolshevik, there used to be Walter Cronkite, but he's not there anymore. Until the top Bolshevik calls him out and arrests him and sends him to Lubyanka, then they stick together and they have more power than everybody else. But until then, nobody's going to call them out. I mean, who's going to call them out? As I said, in America, people don't even know where. My sister just told me, my sister's incredibly smart. My sister just told me that she had read that 50% of American high school seniors did not know where, no, it's not my sister, it's my dear friend Bob, did not know where the United States of America was on a map, did not know where the United States of America was on a map. With this level, nothing can be impossible in the way to ruination of the nation.
So you know what would be amazing, Ben, is you going into schools with like 10 basic questions. Or you going to adults on the left. What is the Continental Congress? You're asking all these like what year was the War of 1812? Because I would imagine 80% of those same people would fail that question.
Yes, yes.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody in the YouTube chat. I really, truly, I love you guys. I love the conversations we have. I would remind everybody to download the podcast, download Gary's podcast, simplelifenow.com. Google Nate Hochman, read his articles. They're really exceptionally good. Young Voices of America. And of course, Ben Stein, spectator.org, read his columns and his stuff on Parler. They're really great. But I also really want to thank Jeff Rios, Ben's helper and friend, who makes when Ben's on location possible, and he does an exceptional job. Thank you, Jeff. He's an exceptional Filipino food cook too. And I'm going to share some of his links so people could order the Filipino food. He's an exceptional young man. And of course, Bob Noah over there, who's also a great cat. And on that note, welcome back.
Bob Noah is an amazing guy.
Welcome back to The World According to Ben Stein. And we're talking about tonight, this is the craziest conversation we're having. We're having a conversation about common sense when there is no sense. And how we're looking at a future of American students, this is even students, these are 30, 40-year-old people, Ben, who have no idea of history, who have zero idea of what Jim Crow was. They hear Jim Crow. I bet you, I don't bet, but I would venture to say, if you ask most people, Ben, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know.
No, something having to do with the Republican Party.
Or they think he was a baseball player that got banned. They would with Jim Crow. They would have no idea.
If you move up a level, it's that they have been taught this really twisted, sort of perverse version of American history, where all you need to know about us is our darkest moments, and our darkest moments define us. And all of the good things that happened were lies that were basically, concocted to conceal the insidious power structures of bigotry and oppression that lurked beneath them, right? The Declaration of Independence was a lie, written by white property owning men to conceal, to help instantiate their own power. Lincoln, it doesn't matter that he freed the slaves because he was mean to Native Americans, right? Every single amazing, exceptional part of American history is sort of debunked and shown to actually be a lie or perverse. And there's this sort of endless obsession with the worst moments of American history, and it's the sort of like the 1619 Project narrative, which I've talked about with you guys before, which is historically inaccurate, right? Saying that the American Revolution was fought to preserve slavery was refuted by historians from across the political spectrum. But it doesn't matter. The New York Times doesn't have to, issue a retraction because it's about power. It's not about truth. It's about, they say it because it advances, the ideological cause. And that, you have the sort of base problem, which is kids aren't learning civics and they don't know about their own history.
And don't know how to add it.
But that makes it easier. That makes it easier.
That what Ben has just said is extremely the most important. They don't know how to add or subtract. There's no adding or subtracting. They're
incredibly uneducated, period. I mean, there's a movie that came out a number of years ago called, what was it called? Idiotopia or something like that, about an America where everyone was just incredibly stupid. And it's happened. It's already happened. It's real. And it's not just Americans who are at trailer park parties and are smoking dope or smoking methamphetamine. It's people in the news, who are high-powered people in the news, who have no idea of what's going on in real life, who have no idea of the history of America, who have no idea of the sacrifices that men and women in America made to keep America free. Example. Big Wifey and I have been watching for quite a while now a very, very long documentary about the war in Vietnam. Very, very long, very interesting, called That Was Nam. The heroism, the courage that the men and women who fought that war put into it is just incredible. And we won many, many battles. Considering we were being held back by the left wing in Washington, we won many, many battles due to pure heroism of the American fighting man and woman and their families. And yet the left endlessly told us we lost and we were killed and freed because we were morally bad. That is such a wicked, wicked lie. And yet that's what we're taught.
I mean, the lies that have been spewed, the revisionist history that you could go back, Ben, no matter how many years, Gary and Nate, and look for flaws. That's all they do, is they look for flaws. They look for what's wrong. They don't look at, and we've brought this up in the past, Ben, when you were younger, you guys didn't care or know about emissions. You didn't know about throwing food on, junk on the side of the highway or seatbelts at a certain point. But you grow. I don't look back at you guys and say, "Oh, you guys are idiots. Seatbelts just weren't invented." And it's so bad the way they view our past, our present, and what will be our future. It's frightening what they're doing.
I have a very close family member. First, I love like mad, heart's blood. Many years ago, decades ago, said, "I don't know how much longer I can continue to live in this racist America." This is a woman who lives the life, appropriately enough, of a multimillionaire, and she is a multimillionaire, and a life of extraordinary, unbelievable privilege. No interaction with African Americans whatsoever of any kind that I'm aware of. And yet, she knew somehow this was a racist country. How did she know it? From the Bolshevist media.
Gary, I want to get to something we really didn't get to, and it's really important because this knife fight that happened with the taser, it's a frightening proposition. You being in former law enforcement, and we were discussing this a little bit last week, and a cop shows up I want you to tell people, let's say you're 30 feet away, how accurate is a taser?
Not very. And not only that, but a taser is not 100% effective by any stretch of the imagination. And with the deadly force continuum, which obviously our media has no clue how it works, they may want to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy or somewhere and learn how the continuum works, but you don't meet deadly force with wrestling techniques. That's not how it works. And the thing is that cop saved that young girl's life, plain and simple. You come to a knife or a gunfight with a knife, you're going to get shot. And anyone who thinks differently, you come out wielding a knife. And there is a well-known video of an instructor that we all in the academy, we had to watch this over and over again. I want to say I may have the feet wrong, but it's 23 feet that you can get stabbed multiple times before you can get your gun out of your holster. Knives, I hate to tell you people, I can kill someone with a knife very quickly. Very, very quickly. You will never regain
far away.
Well, I'm just saying people are stupid. And the fact that they think that he should have tasered, and the fact that LeBron James tweeted that out, that cop needs to get the best attorney known to man and sue the living shit out of LeBron James, sue the media because they cut the tape, they cut the audio, they played with everything. I'm on Ben's side now. Just start suing all of them for liable. And because this is an injustice. And I believe I'm a First Amendment guy, big time. But if you are in the media and you put out a known lie and you adulterate any video or audio on purpose to change the facts, you need to face a felony. A felony. You will go to prison if you do that. And not just you, your chain of command. You're all liable. I want to put these pussies in the position of the cops, because cops don't get paid shit. I'm telling you, it's a brutal job. And these stupid journalists, I want to see them go to prison and decide, learn what the term, I can't say it here, but F for fight means. They'll learn real quick. Don't pick up that bar of soap, buddy. And matter of fact, you better stand with your back to the wall everywhere you go, because these guys have no clue. And that's where we're at. I know I'm going on a little rant here, but these are the people who think freedom is free, and they have no blood and no sacrifice in this freedom. They take it for granted, and they yell at the people who provide it for them. That needs to change. I'm on Ben's side. Sue the shit out of them, get some laws passed, let them go to prison, and let them rot in a cell and see what it's like. See what it's like to be on the other side.
And you're completely right. I just want to tell people, Ben has had a very long time of traveling, and he didn't sleep at all last night. I could attest to that. Since we were conversing, or I got texts. It's amazing.
Ready to go.
Ben is ready to go, and but Ben, Gary
You
brings
are
up
out of
great.
focus, sir. You are out of focus.
Gary brings up some great points. I know it's the internet and buildings. Gary brings up some great points, Ben, about freedom, and they don't. The left, you're getting back to it. The sickness of the left. It's just fascinating.
Sir, with all due respect, this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long, long time. The left in this country has been opposed to freedom of speech for a long, long time. And I might add, the pro-government side in this country has been opposed to free speech for a long, long time. Go back to the Civil War. The Civil War was fought over an incredibly important principle, namely keeping the Union together and freedom for human beings. It was an astonishingly giant event. Nobody pays any attention to it now. I have yet to hear any of the black spokesmen. My old friend Jesse Jackson, that horrifying creep Al Sharpton, anybody, the worst human being in the world, Maxine Waters, ever mention a word about slavery and about the freedom that was earned by the blood of 600,000 or 700,000 white Americans. Nobody ever talks about that. Why don't we use that as a starting point and say, yes, we made some mistakes on the way between there and here, but no other country's ever done this. That's the thing. Cuba didn't do it. Denmark didn't do it. Germany didn't do it. Russia didn't do it. We are the only country where the ruling class sacrificed its sons and their families to give freedom to the enslaved people. Nobody else has ever done it. Why aren't we given gigantic kudos by the rest of the world and by history for that? And start with that and say, and now, today, incredibly, on Bloomberg, I think it's called Bloomberg TV, I see a black man who's the head of some gigantic consulting company complaining there are not enough black men who are in positions of CEO status in giant American corporations. Wait a minute. Everyone knows they're given preferential treatment. That's not a secret. That's not a surprise. If they're not at CEO level, it's because they're not qualified to be at CEO level. There's the idea that these people are being repressed for being black instead of being promoted and favored for being black. That's a joke. That's a ridiculous joke.
And Ben,
Well,
you
it's a
don't have to
fact
go
that
back that far in history.
Well, no, I
Ben,
want
you
to say
don't have
this,
to.
but it's a
Go ahead.
fact. Blacks in America are the most prosperous in the world. That's a fact. That is a
Of course.
100%
Of course.
fact.
Great point.
Of course. And why I've said this a million, billion, trillion times. There's a big, giant continent across the ocean called Africa. It's a giant continent full of
Been there,
natural
it sucks.
resources. And anytime the American black feels he's being oppressed here and would be more comfortable there, he can go back there. I don't want him to. I like rock and roll. I like great sports teams. I like all the things that black people bring to America.
Basketball wouldn't be quite the same, I think.
But that wouldn't be quite the same. But the idea that they're kept here against their will in concentration camps is crazy. I just go almost every day to lunch, not every day, but almost every day to the Beverly Hills Hotel for lunch because it's only a couple of blocks from my house. I won't be able to afford to do it much longer, but for a while I'm doing it. The place is full of African Americans in Bentleys, just Lamborghinis, Ferraris. These are the oppressed people of America. What's going on here? Where did that idea even come from?
You raise a great point, and here's the thing you said. You want them to go back 200 years.
Let's
take it. Let's make it easier. Let's go back to the civil rights movement. You guys don't know this, but Ben wrote a brilliant book or a movie called Murder in Mississippi, which was also the Mississippi burning, which was about the two Jews and the black guy that got killed in the car, right? What?
By the Ku Klux Klan.
By the Ku Klux Klan. And most people don't realize, man, most black people don't realize there is no civil rights movement without the Jews, right? They don't realize our influence. And so you want to go back even 200 years. We don't need to, the history of how the civil rights movement has started has been distorted. So not just all the things you brought up, we've distorted 60 years ago. And that just shows you, even in schools, that kids aren't being taught this is disgraceful and frightening.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And I mean, look, whites in America, some of them have been incredibly horrible to black. There's no doubt about that. We cannot argue about that. It's true. But some have been incredibly wonderful. And nobody, as I said before, has ever fought a war, the likes of which has never been seen in the Western Hemisphere, over getting rights for the subjugated class. Only the United States of America did that. That was magnificent, bloody, but magnificent. No one ever gives white people or the United States of America credit. Never.
Gary's point was brilliant too, and I want you to say it again because it was really brilliant. Say it one more time, Gary.
Which part? That blacks are the most prosperous in America by far? Not only that, but you know who is responsible for the killing of the most blacks?
The blacks.
That's another fact. Well, why don't we work on that instead of worrying about, white cops going out and slaughtering blacks on the streets every single day, which is complete and utter nonsense. Statistically, if you look at the police contacts with blacks in the U.S., the numbers are 0.00000. I mean, it's so far off the charts. And even with those, the ones that are unarmed, they don't talk about the ones that were trying to run them over with a car, trying to bash them over the head with a board. I mean, it's ridiculous. Do we have racial tension in this country? Yeah. Is it pretty much predominantly because the left is trying to rally everyone against, this systemic racism? Yeah. But the problem is there's racism everywhere in the world. That is a human trait. And I don't say that it's right, but it is a fact. Every ethnic group has faced some sort of racism during their history on this time the planet. The Neanderthals, for God's sakes, were knocked out by Homo sapiens. Golly, how far back do we have to go with this crap? I mean, it's to the point where I just don't even know what to say anymore. Are people just burying their heads in the sand?
Yes, they are burying their heads are being buried and squished into the sand by Black Lives Matter and the amazing number of fools who support them. I mean, Lenin, I think it was, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, said there are various kinds of people in the West who are helpful to us, and some are what we call useful idiots, who are actually believe in communism, think it's a good thing, and they're idiots because communism is going to kill them, but they're useful idiots.
Nate, I want to get to you, then I want to ask if I should ask a very politically incorrect question, and if you think I should, but Nate, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to add to Gary's very cogent point is, America, there is racism everywhere. It is a fundamental feature of the human condition. And of course, there will always be racism in America, but America is the least racist country, at least the least racist, racially diverse country in the history of the world. And we should be willing to stand up, with our shoulders straight and courageously say that. It is that you will be ridiculed in the public square for just pointing that out now, right? But it's true. And we should be able to say the truth, right? This is the greatest country in the history of the world for any race to live in, right? It's the least racist country in the history of the world that has any type of racial diversity whatsoever. And when, progressives and leftists say, well, we should be more like Sweden. Sweden's 90% white. You want a white ethno state? That's what you want, right? Like, a lot of our problems come from our diversity, but I thought we're supposed to like diversity, right?
But in Sweden,
that's great. That's great.
Terrible, terrible problems with non-white immigrants, and the rapes of those cute blonde Swedish girls by non-white immigrants has become a real crisis in Sweden. And
there is a very increasingly popular far right movement in Sweden as a result. Yeah. Real Nazis, like they're winning seats in parliament. So the idea that Sweden is this like progressive utopia, you can see that it's because it's all white people, right? And the second that you inject non-white people into there, all of a sudden Nazis pop up, right? So like this is like, that you can't say I love diversity And also we should be more like Sweden because, it is
That's
hard to live with.
exceptional
Denmark.
point.
It's hard to live in a country with lots of different people who speak different languages from different cultures and different backgrounds. And we as Americans, by and large, have actually figured out a way to do it. And that's a miracle. I mean, that is
No one else has ever done. No one else.
And,
Okay.
and that's something that we don't talk about anymore.
Okay, so guys, I have a question. I'm going to ask this question. You don't have to answer it on the grounds that it could incriminate you. But we do have proof and we do have data of what reparations do, of what giving land back does, and how it destroyed a nation, which is the ending of apartheid. Now, we saw the ending of apartheid in Africa then, and it literally has destroyed the damage that it's done. And I'm not saying anybody should have been enslaved, but what I am saying is the way that situation was handled, of just giving back the land, and the repercussions that have happened from it have been devastating.
Well, they've been devastating indeed. And South Africa was the only really industrial, successful, politically liberal country in Black Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, they had a terrible, terrible repressive system called apartheid. There's no doubt it was a terrible, cruel system. There's no question about that. But to just suddenly throw open the keys to the kingdom to the African, especially African Americans, to the Africans, and say, okay, now that all this stuff is yours, that didn't work. Yes, they should absolutely have gotten political power in South Africa. There's no question about that. They're the great majority that should have gotten political power, but they were not trained. They were not educated to handle it. There's been fantastic corruption. Something seriously wrong there, and the idea that reparations are going to fix it didn't work. Never worked anywhere. Yes, the reparations paid to the Jews by the Nazis, that did work because the Jews were already well educated and extremely self-disciplined, so that did work. But reparations paid to people who do not have a history of education and self-discipline has not been shown to be a success.
But more than just reparations, Ben, land given back. It was like you gave somebody, you gave somebody this beautiful thing, and you said you don't have the tools of how to work it, but here you go. And here we are right now in South Africa, where it's just a mess. Gary Collins, if you feel comfortable talking about what I just brought up.
Well, I just will leave it at this. Free shit is never free. So that's all I have to say about
it. That's lovely. Nate, you don't have to chime in.
No. I'll talk about anything. I mean, I have sort of a heterodox answer here, which is like, I'm not actually doctrinally against reparations in theory. People forget Ronald Reagan signed a reparations bill for the Japanese Americans who had been interned by FDR. So it's not like, I think it's not the worst way for a nation that has done a wrong to a particular group of people to try to make amends for that. But there are, practically speaking, there's like a bunch of huge issues, right? And philosophically speaking, the difference in like between the Ronald Reagan reparations bill for the Japanese and like a reparations bill for the descendants of slaves, like that reparations bill that Reagan signed was for the actual people who had been put in camps by FDR, not their great grandchildren. So it is not like America did anything bad to the people that would get reparations here, like they did in that bill. And also just practically speaking, I don't know how you determine, like, does Kamala Harris get reparations, right? Like, if you have 1%,
the Native Americans actually do have this great scale. And I know that if you're like one of it, you get a certain stipend. They actually have it. Gary, you know what I'm referring to, right? They have it.
Yeah, half my town I grew up in is Indian reservation. So yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, they have it like, but trust me, they'll never figure it out. Ben Stein, final thoughts, or what are you thinking about?
The Japanese reparation situation was completely different because what the government gave back to them was what had been theirs and was seized at the beginning of World War II. And we gave that, or the financial equivalent of that, back to them. The present reparations bill that's being discussed is to just write a blank check to all people who are in any part African American, whether they had any property in the first place. And that's, that's just going to be the equivalent of each of them winning a lottery. And why it is that, for example, the people, guy sitting to my right, Jeff Reyes, who's from the Philippines, why his family never owned any slaves in America, my family never owned any slaves in America. Why would we have to pay back anything to anyone? I don't understand that at all. What I do understand is something does have to be done about the blacks in America. And I think that condescending to them and treating them as if they're spoiled babies instead of expecting them to behave like the disciplined, intelligent people that they can be is a big mistake.
No, it's a brilliant point, Gary. And I don't even, who would want, I mean, I guess there are a lot of people who would want, I'm asking like the dumbest question in the world, who would want free money? But this, as you said, nothing's free, and the damage of reparations is going to be far worse than what's going on right now.
Well, when you open Pandora's box, I mean, if they're going to pay reparations to blacks, then I think what you're going to do is every group who's ever faced any kind of racism in this country, Italians, the Irish, I'm Irish, it's never going to end. And you could see those groups, because now what you have is precedents. You're going to set precedents then, and if any group can prove that they were harmed, even though none of us were alive then, we can prove that, well, we should legally be able to get reparations as well. Am I wrong, Ben?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong in the slightest. And but it just opens up a can of worms and makes it incredibly complicated. Look, I was recently blackballed from being a member of the El Dorado Country Club in Indian Wells, California, because I'm Jewish, and it hurt my feelings a lot. And I was missed out on some very fine meals. I'd like some reparations for that. Why can't I have those?
And it hurt your golfing handicap.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing, and this is like the other sort of objection that I have to it, again, despite being like not sort of knee jerk against it in theory, is the fact that it would not make anything better, because these are not people who will sort of pack up and go home once they get their reparations bill, right? Like Ta-Nehisi Coates and the Black Lives Matter leaders and the Black activist class, like they're not going to stop doing what they're doing. They're not going to stop burning down cities because they got a reparations bill, right? Like it's about power, and it's about what you can make people do. So once they make you do that, they'll just try to make you do something else. And there's no atonement that will actually happen. This is like, we've talked about this before on this show. Actual African Americans are much more conservative than most demographics in America, actually, and certainly than like the activist class. So most African Americans, I think, would actually, they'd feel like, well, this is great. I feel better about my country, now that I've gotten a formal apology. But the activists who claim to speak for them will continue to agitate until the day they die. They're not interested in atoning.
By the way, just so you know, I think you're using the wrong word. And I had a discussion with Ben about this because we were fascinated about what you said. They're not conservative, they're religious. And there's a big difference. There's a very different line. They have religious values. They don't have, as you would call it, politically conservative values.
Well, they do in some way. I mean, there's people talk about religious conservatives, right? So that's like they're more pro-life. They're
right. No, but I mean, that's even right. But that's
religious conservatism.
That's not conservatism.
But they're also. I mean, I don't know if I brought this up, but like this is a really staggering statistic. White liberals are further left on race than blacks are in America today. White liberals are more likely to say that if a black person can't get ahead, it's because of racism than black people are, which is insane, right? It's an insane statistic, but it's true. This is Pew. So you can go down the list of like any other number of issues, but like. Wow. On the issues, they actually are pretty politically conservative, but they vote for Democrats 9 out of 10 times because they sort of feel like that's their party and the Republican Party is racist, and that's just the way things go. But it's not just that they're religious, although that's a big part of it. They're actually a very conservative group of people by opinion poll.
I will have to trust you. Ben Stein, final words.
This is still an incredibly great, wonderful country, and I think we should spend every minute we have left on this planet, at least part of every minute, thanking God on our knees for being allowed to live in this incredibly great country and for being allowed to live under a free enterprise system under the Constitution. It is a miracle in the history of mankind.
I agree. Gary Collins, final thoughts.
Fight for your right to party. That's how I leave it with.
Nate Hockman, final thoughts.
I can't really say it better than Ben and Gary, so I'll leave it at that.
I just want to end on this because I said I would always tell a story at the end of every show of an impactful thing, of an incredible thing that I saw Ben do or witness. And it's extremely important. This is 17 years ago, and I've probably shared this before. We were dog walking on the street, and Ben was sharing with me how he had donated money to Al Franken's campaign. And me being in my mid to late 20s, couldn't understand how Ben Stein could donate money to this liberal leftist. And Ben said to me, he said, when I was starting out, and Al Franken was a big help to me. And I remember that. And I was loyal to him. And that's Ben Stein. And that was the lesson I learned today. And this is a lesson, Ben, I wish you could impart upon every American, because that was a really special lesson you taught me. So it's not about party always. It's about friendships and it's about bonds. And you understand that better than anybody.
Well, God bless you, sir. God bless you. God bless you. Oh, well, I danced till 2:45 when they had that night with Daddy G. We were dancing, we were rocking, we were dancing all night to the sounds of Gary Bonds. There, so that's Bonds. Gary U.S. Bonds.
That's the song for tonight?
That's your song. Gary.
Okay, God bless you, everybody. Have a great night.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.